Today we have Michel Thierry speaking about what is a VMO really. So Michel, I met Michel many, many years ago when we were doing value engineering in Montreal. And Michel moved on to do value programs and value a lot of value activities, let's say, but also program management and, as he was just saying before, transformation of companies through radical programs. So Michel has a great experience in transformation, and he's going to talk about the Value Management Office, what it is, what it can do, what are the results that we can expect from a Value Management Office. So I don't want to take time from his speech, so I will let him start right away.
Thank you. And then I just realized I have a little shine here on my head. Usually you see that in older people, so I think I'm getting a bit older here. So, hello everybody. I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. Michel Thierry. I graduated in Montreal as an architect. I started worked in construction for about 20 years, and then in '96 we decided to move to the UK and worked initially for a large global construction company in their program management department, and I was hired as a value manager. Um, at the time, I was a member of SAVE, I was CVS, I had a 40-hour workshop, and then I got involved with the European side, first with the Institute of Value Management in the UK, and then the EGB, European Governing Board for Value Management Training and Certification, for which, interestingly, I was the UK's representative for many years. And at the same time, I developed a career in program management, moving from construction to all kinds of industries. I did work in IT, sewer treatment, uh, air traffic control, pharma, and a number of others. So in 2003, we opened our own firm as we call ourselves organizational architects, and we do consulting and training in a number of domains, including program, value, and others. So today I'm going to talk about the VMO, and the VMO is at the moment a buzzword. I know Lucy doesn't like that when I say that because she said fads are made to disappear. But so we're going to look at, first, what are the current views of the VMO? How come we're talking about VMO today? And why value is making a comeback? I mean, we all know that Larry Miles developed value engineering and value analysis in the late 40s, early 50s at GE. Um, and it was very popular at one point as value engineering. And then it lost a bit of track. But it's making a comeback more at organizational level. And at project. I mean, projects now are asked to potentially contribute to delivering value. And so we're going to look at then what are the key elements of the VMO? How do we measure value? How do we, make decisions and govern the VMO? And how do we set it up? What are the roles and responsibilities? So I would ask you if it's okay to keep your questions to the end, but you can put them in the chat. I think Lucy and Michaela are going to monitor the chat and come up with some of the interesting questions at the end. So I'll start right away. So what are the current views of the VMO and why do we talk about VMO? So um, The VMO has evolved from the PMO. Now, PMO is either a project or program management office, and it has been evolving in the early 90s. So basically, the PMOs were initially not called PMOs. We just had a group of people that were promoting uh, project management in organizations, how to do project management. Then in the mid 90s, the idea was to attest the PM processes, say that are the PM processes following a standard or a method that makes sense. Then the idea in the early 2000s and late 90s was to support best PM practices and try to promote project management in the organization. Then it was about implementing best practices um, and then monitoring those practices. So more and more the PMO became an overall kind of reporting hub where they gathered reporting on all the projects and gave that to the management. So therefore, monitoring project became managing the portfolio, the project portfolio, and that's when it also went to the point of now, okay, we're managing the portfolio, but what else? And recently in project management, there has been a movement uh, pushed by the agile approach that we need to deliver more than just outputs in a project. We need also to deliver value, value for the customers, value for the stakeholders. And so the idea, the PMO took on that and said, okay, now how do we deliver value? And today, we're looking at calling it more a VMO. We move from a project focus to a culture focus to a portfolio focus, and today we're moving what is called the PMO to a value focus. Why we're talking about VMO is because we're slowly moving from the idea that it's not just about managing projects, but if we want to manage value, we have to look at the bigger picture. So if we look at different views of the VMO. I've taken these from the internet this week. So Kaplan was the first to, I would say, coin the term value management office in healthcare. And he said the value management office partners with different groups to realize efficiencies across the full episode of care. So it was about hospitals that were creating hubs to coordinate all the people who work in care together so that they could actually create better care. Now, Michael Fritsch posted on LinkedIn what is the VMO and the difference between PMO and VMO, and he came up with this whole concept that the PMO concentrates on delivering projects ensuring they're completed on time, within scope, and on budget. As I said earlier, more of a reporting kind of approach. The VMO, on the other hand, focuses on delivering value, ensuring that every initiative aligns with strategic objectives. So for him, delivering value was aligning with strategic objectives. We'll talk about that a bit later. And SAFE, Scaled Agile framework. For those of you who are in Agile, you probably know SAFE. So it says that the VMO often emerge from existing PMOs. They have accountability for establishing and improving practices, for measuring and improving the flow of value across a portfolio's value stream. So here you get the idea of the value stream, which is a bit different. We'll talk about the value stream a bit later. But the whole idea is that you see that the PMO is slowly evolving into something more that covers a broader area and make sure that they deliver value for the organization. Now, we can talk why this renewal of value, why today? Well, if we look at the historical context, until the Industrial Revolution, people did not separate their work from the ultimate value of the work. If you look at hunter-gatherers, they went on a hunt. It was not the process of hunting. It was the process of feeding their tribe. farmers planted seeds to actually feed the village. The temple builders built places of worship. They were not building a building, they were building a place of worship. So there was no real separation between the work itself and its ultimate purpose. And sponsors funded valuable outcomes, not the work itself. So the project was fully integrated to the ultimate goal. Now, the Industrial Revolution came and we introduced what was called modern project organization, where the focus was on the deliverable of the project. And it relied on the sponsor organization to create a link with the final outcome or the expected outcome. And the focus was much more on the process. And interestingly, it's the first time people got paid for time rather than result. In the past, if you were a carpenter, you were paid when you delivered the cupboard to the client, not for the time you spent delivering the cupboard. They didn't care about how much time you spent. You could spend 2 years or 1 month. You got paid when the cupboard was delivered to the satisfaction of the client. And that changed. We started getting paid by the time we spent working, irrelevant of the result. And therefore the project teams became completely detached from the value creation. And the sponsors became managers who coordinated the work and made sure that all the pieces of work got together and created a product. And that's still the model we have today in many organizations. And that is still the model that was definitely part of the late 19th and early and the whole 20th century. Now, why today do we refocus on value? Well, one of the things that happened is that with COVID, a lot of people started working from home. And this remote work has changed the work-life balance. People are starting to say, "Hey, okay, I was paid by hour, but because I work from home, you cannot check my time, and people are getting more and more paid by result. So they give you a task and they say, whatever time you take to do the task, well, you get paid when the task is done. Um, Social media and the internet shopping create expectations also of the quick, easy results. You order something online, you expect it to arrive at your door the next day. And again, you don't care about how it gets there. You care about, I'm going to get the product the next day. So people are more and more focusing on quick results, which is different than what it was in the past when you could spend 2 years building a nice commode or a cupboard or something like that, or a temple. And we have also refocus on stakeholder customer value. I mean, Amazon is a good example of that. The whole mindset and mission of Amazon is to serve the client. If it makes it easier for the client, we should do it. That's their whole purpose. And so we have more purpose-driven objectives focused on the client. We want quicker results, and we less and less we have this approach of being rewarded for time. More and more it's becoming being rewarded for a result. So more practical, more short term. So how do we measure value? Well, over time, I've come upon different views of value, and I've identified three perspectives of value. The first one is the financial result. For example, return on investment, uh, opportunity versus risk, um, revenue versus expenditure. And so that type of financial result is easy to calculate because it's numbers, but it's very hard to predict because the numbers you use will continually change. If you use an interest rate to calculate your net present value, or if you use your future value and things like that, it's very difficult to be accurate because all those factors continually change and evolve. And if you look at the stock exchange, if you look at companies that say, okay, how much are we going to make this year? They project the revenues and all that. It's never exactly as planned because they rely on numbers that are hard to predict. But it's easy to calculate, so it gives you a quick decision. Okay, we're going to make 2 millions with that project. Let's do it. Okay, but nobody really measures the actual result, and that's one of the problems. Now, the predictive ratio is more based on what value analysis, value engineering do. We're doing, if we talk strictly traditional value engineering, quality versus cost, or if we're using the European standard, we're talking about satisfaction of the customer versus the resources used to achieve that satisfaction. But again, this is based on estimates. And it relies on having good data available. So if you don't have good data, or if you don't have the right data, all your calculations are wrong. And I mean, I had the discussion with Lucie when we met during the holidays, and we're saying that the traditional save 40-hour workshop with the external team coming in, and I participated in some of that, and I ran some of those. We were predicting savings that, in fact, when you put them in practice, often never got achieved. We maybe achieved 20% of the savings we predicted because our numbers were based on a 1 week study and not necessarily on something that was real or consistent. And that's what's happening with that type of approach to value is if you don't have the right data, if you don't have good data, then you can't really predict. It's not a good predictive method. Now, adaptive balance is the one that I've been promoting for many years. It's more accurate because it's dynamic, which means it continually evolves as projects. As we today we are doing more and more complex, we're in more and more complex situations where a project continually has to evolve, things like that. Well, this approach gives you a continual update of your data and a little bit in line with what I said earlier about getting quick results. You will break down your project, your program, your initiative into smaller pieces, which are therefore incremental. But also you apply an iterative process where you continue review your data for the next step. And that's very much the influence of agile in project management. And a lot of project management and a lot of projects now are done in that way. And there's a new term that came up in project management recently that's called hybrid project management, which mixes agile methods with more traditional project methods, which are more sequential. And so that's what I'm trying to promote. So the other point I want to make about value is how do we create value? So what we do with projects, we generate outputs, specific results, technical results, things like that. Then, when these outputs are put into operations, uh, we have capabilities. For example, when you have, in this case, it's a chemical plant for a pharma company. So you deliver the plant as a project. You give the organization capability to produce better quality units at a higher rate. Okay, that's the capability. And that's what operations get. Now, when you go into production, you produce outcomes. You actually produce more units per day of a better and higher quality. What happens then is that if the health professionals, they're selling your product, then you start getting benefits. You increase your market share, you get a better reputation, et cetera, et cetera. You can have, you can have a number of different benefits that are, and that's at the program level. That's what programs usually look at. And finally, at the organizational level, you'll get more value when generally your organization is recognized as an organization that enables people to be more healthy, to help families be more happy, etc. Now, one thing we have to understand when we talk about, because and the mistake we often make is we see value here. Now, value is not here, and value is not with the outcomes. Value is really when we integrate the whole thing together. And to give you an example, when we talk about outputs, capabilities, and outcomes, these are absolute measures. They can be measured objectively. If you deliver the production plant, if operations are doing their job, you will produce more units of a higher quality. Now, that doesn't necessarily give you benefit because if the product is not adapted to the market, if, for example, you don't have a good logistics system to distribute the product, if the health professionals have not been made aware through a marketing campaign or by salespeople that you have this product on the market and it's really good and this is what it does and these are the contra effects, these are the good effects, etc. And if, for example, you have not made sure that the population is aware and willing to use your product, then you will have no benefits. You might even have disbenefits because you will have a surplus of merchandise that will be wasted that you will not be able to sell. So benefits and value are highly context dependent. And that's why we say that a single project cannot deliver value. It contributes to delivering value, but it's at the program level when you manage multiple projects together that you will be able to deliver benefits that potentially in the longer term will deliver value to the organization. Now, when we talk about value, we talked about this idea. I always said return on investment, benefits, cost, um, opportunity versus risk. As you notice, I've always given you two words because value, and that's since the time of Bernoulli, a Swiss mathematician of the 1700s, he came up with this concept that a value was based on two concepts. It's partly the risk you take and the benefit you get in return. And so it's always a ratio. Now, when we talk about ratio, we can talk about revenue versus expenditure. We can talk about quality versus cost. We can talk about satisfaction of user versus resources used. I'm using slightly different terms. I'm using the alignment with expected objectives and the achievability of agreed solutions. Why do I use those? Because objectives may change over time during the course of a project, during the course of a program, during the course of a business initiative. Your objectives may change because we live in a complex environment these days that is changing very fast. And therefore, what you thought might have been a good idea, let's say last year, may not be such a good idea this year. We've seen, for example, recent examples. I don't want to name anybody, but big social media and internet buying companies that have suddenly switched their views of the world because of external circumstances. Obviously, you know who I'm talking about. And so if the objectives change, you have to realign. So the alignment is something that is fluid and flexible. Now, in each case, and we know that in value management, when we look at how are we going to resolve this problem? We have to be creative. We have to find a number of solutions. It's the ideation process, and then we choose the best solutions. So when we start looking at what are the best solutions, we have to measure their achievability. Is this something that can be achieved? Because if you don't measure the achievability, you're not talking about realized objective, you're talking about potentially realizing objectives, and therefore you're talking about potential value, not realized value. And therefore, every time you come up with new solutions to new problems, you have to verify their achievability. And that's why I talk about an adaptive balance, because you have to balance the two. Am I aligned? Is my solution aligned with the objectives? And is it achievable? And constantly, you have to rebalance that. And that's why it's highly adaptive. So you're looking at how well do we realize the benefits and how can we optimize the risk being linked to uncertainty to make sure that they're achievable. So I've developed over the years a process for doing that. Well, first I built what is called a benefits breakdown structure, which is a combination of a project work breakdown structure with a function diagram, a value function diagram using the how-why logic. And that works very well. And then when you build your benefits breakdown structure, it's possible then to establish and prioritize what are your critical success factors. And your critical success factors represent the expected objectives of your stakeholders. Once you go to the next levels, and by the way, if for those who work in IT, this is what now we call the portfolio backlog, program backlog, development backlog, and product backlog. That's what it creates basically. And then we take some of these outputs that are identified here and group them to create potential project. Now, this is done a bit upside down from what is done in traditional projects. In traditional projects, you would first define the project and then define the outputs of the project, the deliverables. In this case, first you define the deliverables and then you group them into projects based on the teams and on the capacities and capabilities you have. So you create your teams, and then you verify the initiative's alignment score. How well does it align with those critical success factors? And how achievable it is based on 4 groups of factors: financial factors, resourcing factors, limiting factors, and complexity factors. I won't enter into detail because it would take a whole presentation just for that. And then you combine that into grid to create your value index. And the projects and programs that have the higher value index will be the ones that you will promote. And as I said, you're incremental in your approach. Therefore, you create not looking at necessarily the ultimate benefit, but how can we deliver increments of the benefits, what I call meaningful benefit increment, that will be delivered in time and will allow you to iterate and to realign regularly. So that's the process. Now, when we look at value-based decisions and governance, because we have to look at the bigger picture now, typically when you talk about decision management, you talk about using value management and project management combined. So you will look at what is your intended value. So you do some sense making, ideation, the creativity bit, and then elaboration, which is the judgment part of the traditional value engineering process. And then that's the sense making is where you elicit your expected benefits from your stakeholders. Then you find a number of potential ideas that could be applicable, assess their achievability, define your expected outcomes, and then make a choice, select the proposed actions that you're going to undertake. And as you undertake the actions, you apply a more project approach of planning, execution, control, where you define the proposed deliverables, measure the achieved outcomes, and eventually deliver benefits. And the little icons here are basically to illustrate that this is more a human process here. This is a workshop type, meeting type of thing that you're going to do. Here, when you assess the achievability, you have to combine um, the human part where the stakeholders have to agree to your objectives, but you also base that on data. When you plan, you do the same thing. The planning is done by individuals who think this is the best idea, but you have to support that by data, and measuring the outcome should be data-based. Okay. Now, how do we apply then this decision management cycle later? Well, if we look at the bigger picture and we want to integrate the value stream, we could say that organization basically have two types of activities. One is to transform the business, and one is to run the business. Run the business is all the operations, production, things like that, management. Um, Transform the business is all the projects, the initiatives you take to be better place for the future. And if we look at what we do, we start by planning value. We define the objectives we want to achieve. Then we execute value, we deliver outputs. And when the project deliver outputs, we have only potential value. We don't have real value yet. We'll have real value when we produce outcomes. That's where we create value. And the value for the organization will be when we generate benefits and integrate everything together. And here, typically, we have portfolio and enterprise direction. Here, we tailor our strategy and do business analysis. That's where projects and innovations are typically, and operations and productions. And when you have programs, program management covers this whole area. Now, I'm showing this because it's important to understand that one cannot work without the other. You cannot create value without looking at this bigger picture. And therefore, if you're focusing on a PMO that looks only at the projects, you're only looking at this part here. You cannot create value for the whole organization. You really have to take a bigger picture view. And if we look at our learning cycles and performance cycles, typically you will have learning loops here at when you make your strategic choice, then you have a go, no-go decision, a choice, then you implement, then you go to the selecting of initiatives. And as you implement, you may have an emergent input, something that was not planned. What we typically do then is apply again a learning loop, make sense of the situation, look for ideas, see if these ideas are achievable, and then if yes, go on, and that's change management, basically. And then conceptual improvement, development adjustment, implementation adjustment, and benefits evaluation. But as you see again, it's an incremental and iterative process where you continually reevaluate the results. And the focus is on innovation and adaptability. How can you continually innovate, and how can you adapt to new situation? Now, before we finish, I'm going to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and really look at setting up the VMO in terms of the context, the roles, and responsibilities. So when you're looking at the organizational level, the organization defines vision and mission, and at the executive level, people define strategic objectives, which create generic critical success factors for the organization. We have to increase our reputation. We have to have a bigger share of the market. We have to increase our shareholder value. These are the big things we're talking about. And that's what I call portfolio direction. In order to achieve this, what type of activity should we invest in? Should we invest more in operations or more in new initiatives? Should we invest more in security? And that is a decision that should be made at the higher level. So then you have your customers and you have your stakeholder management, and that's where you establish your context strategy. How will your strategy adapt to the context? Which Porter called the business strategy. And that's basically defines your specific critical success factor. What are the specific critical success factors you want for next year? And that defines your programs, projects, and operational activities that you will undertake during the year or during the next period. More and more organizations are having a quarterly strategy now, which means it does it 4 times a year. Then you go into execution, deployment, you project program level, you deliver products, services, potentially create benefits and realize value at operational level. Then you gather data, you verify that it's aligned with the context strategy, verify the alignment with the corporate strategy and the vision mission, reformulate if needed. And it's a continual loop like that that you have to do in organizations. Now, the value stream is basically what is the most effective way, the least effort way. It's based on lean management. The most effective way to go from the stakeholders, the customers' needs and expectations to the satisfaction of the customer. So in organization, typically, you have a 1 to 3 year strategic view here. You have your higher level horizon, which is the corporate strategy, vision, and mission. You combine those two to a tactical 1 year approach. And typically, your value stream goes through that process and renews on a regular basis. Now, the PMO, the traditional PMO, will cover this area here. And the VMO, if you really want to create value, has to be much wider ranging and cover a much broader area of the business. So you can't just focus on projects, outputs, and deliverables. You have to go broader than that. You have to look at benefits and you have to look at value overall. Now, what do we need to do that? Well, first you need to define what value is, and that's probably the hardest part. I see a lot of people talking about value. We need to produce value. And when you ask them, well, how do you define value? Well, except for the financial approach, most organizations don't define value very well. So you have to identify the why. Why are we doing this? What is our purpose? And then keep the subjective in sight at all times. Once you have that, you need to assign the work. Define what are your meaningful benefit increment. What are the benefits you're trying to achieve? And what are the steps that you're going to take to achieve that? An MBI is basically something that is tangible, that can be measured, and that brings tangible value to the stakeholders. For example, if I take one of the rewilding projects here, NEP Estate in the UK, during the process, they want to rewild the whole area of England. They have a whole area that they're looking at. But for example, at one point, they started introducing pigs, wild pigs into that, which produced different effects. But one of the things that they said, well, since we have the pigs, we can't let the pigs just reproduce and reproduce. We have to cull them. And so they decided to organize with the butchers, and they opened a restaurant in the estate. Now the restaurant serves only meat and food from environment and farmers that are in the neighborhood, in the area. And that's a way to promote the idea. And that is an MBI, for example. It doesn't reach the ultimate benefit of rewilding, but it funds some of the initiatives It creates marketing for the estate. It creates a reputation of helping the community and helping the local product producers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an MBI. That's an example of MBI. Okay, and that's the how. How are we going to get there? Then do evaluate the achievability of these MBIs and evaluate the achievability of the initiatives. And then you need to measure the results through the value index. Have we aligned with the objectives and has it been achievable? Has the achievability been achieved? And then you do retrospective and iteration. Okay, that's the way to proceed. Now, the key roles and responsibilities of a VMO are typically you have your executive sponsor, who has ultimate accountability for value. You have a value board, which is responsible for governance and decision making. You have a value stream manager who is accountable for the management and guiding. A value stream manager is a term that comes from disciplined agile, and talks about how can we improve the stream of value through the organization, throughout the organization. I associate it now to the role of the program manager also. There are, in my opinion, equivalent roles. The benefit owner, who is responsible for eliciting the needs and expectations from the different stakeholders, and also making sure that operations integrate the outputs from the project. And what we call in Disciplined Agile a focused solution team, which is a multidisciplinary results-oriented team, where you bring larger teams together, but they're responsible for a whole MBI delivery. And the important thing is that all these people need to collaborate together. If they don't, it doesn't work. And finally, in conclusion, if I say, what is the VMO's raison d'etre? I used the French term because I couldn't find a good equivalent English term. It's probably to continually aim to improve the harmony and elegance of a situation to the satisfaction of its stakeholders. And harmony and elegance are not just nice words plucked out of the air. Harmony means things are working in harmony, that there's no battles, no conflicts, that everything is smooth going. And elegance means it's the minimal, it's a lean term, basically. It's you get the minimal things you need to have a good solution. Okay. And what are the values you need to achieve this? Well, you need to first make sense. Sense making is a very important aspect of that. How do we make sense of the situation? What situation are we in? Is it highly complex? Is it simple? Can we go with predictive? Should we go with more adaptive approaches? Then make sure you engage your stakeholders, that they are part of the team. That's the whole concept of collaboration. Okay, make sure that your stakeholders agree to what you're doing, that you're actually serving them, but they understand what you're doing and they collaborate with you. You have to deliver value sustainably, not just once or not just theoretical value, but continually deliver value on an ongoing basis. And therefore, you have to continually also improve, find better ways of doing things. And that's, in my opinion, probably summarizes what the VMO should be and what it should do. Obviously, there's much more that I could have spoken about experience and all that, but let's say this is it for me today. And now I will be open to your question. By the way, the QR codes that are there, the one here on the left is my LinkedIn profile, and the one on the right is our website for Valence. So, yes, any questions?